Howard are fed up with the amount of deer making their way into their residential neighborhoods. Village of Howard holding a special deer control committee meeting tonight to address the public's concerns. News 10 Drew Best attended that meeting in Howard. He brings us more on exactly what people are worried about.
The first meeting of Howard's brand new deer control committee focused on getting to the bottom of how exactly the deer population got to the point where dozens of deer are living and roaming around Howard subdivisions. Dozens of people watched on as village officials discussed possible solutions for deer overpopulation. The public sharing concerns about deer eating plants on their property and large herds crossing busy streets. Two suggestions made by the committee were writing ordinances against feeding deer and possibly expanding the bow hunting season. The committee also immediately ruled out killing the deer through sharpshooting. Members of the public and the committee agree this is a man-made issue.
Yes, it's wonderful to see wildlife, but let wildlife be wildlife. And if there's not a good source of natural food for them, they do tend to move away to where there is.
We're the problem. We took out the woods, we took out their environment, and they have no place to go, so they come to where they can get fed.
None of the suggestions discussed at Wednesday night's meeting will be made official until written ordinances are brought before the village board. The committee putting together another meeting for April 24th. Burt McIntyre, the village president, saying this is an issue that could take years to solve. Reporting in Howard, Drew Best, Action 2 News.